Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Dr. Bobby Sura. I'm a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist, director at Solihull Wellbeing Clinic. It's lovely to be with you this evening for tonight's well-being conversation. And tonight, we're very privileged to be joined by a lady called Fiona Catchpowle. And Fiona is a menopause doula. She'll explain what that means in a minute. But tonight, we're going to be talking about the menopause, managing the menopause, what it means for people that may be going through it, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, allow me to bring Fiona onto the screen. Hi, Fiona.
Hi, good evening.
Lovely to have you on this channel tonight to talk about the menopause. So you may as well start, Fiona, with telling us what a menopause doula is, because that's quite an interesting term.
Yeah, it is. And well, a doula is historically a companion, not a healthcare professional, someone that can guide, facilitate learning and support that person going through a significant health, situation. So they may be familiar with doulas from what we call the cradle to grave scenario. So there are birthing doulas and end of life doulas. And so when we were actually looking for a word to describe what we were providing, we felt that the word mentor or coach or therapist, it didn't suit, and it is literally the word doula. And it was actually Dr. Joanne who suggested the word, so that was really cool.
Lovely. That's fantastic. So, Fiona, the menopause, it affects households up and down the country. There isn't a family that isn't going to experience it at some time, but it's one of the, I think, most misunderstood and missed aspects of human development. So, do you want to tell us a bit about what the menopause is? How is it described? What would people say about it?
Well, it's not described very well, and that's one of the biggest problems, the way the word itself is used in the first instance and what it represents. So quite simply, from along what we would call our hormone highway, a female, somebody with a uterus, a menstruator, we start our periods just after puberty. So girls and boys would reach puberty, perhaps girls were a little bit ahead of time, so about 8, 9, and then couple of years later is when the ovaries switch on, and then we start to have periods. Now boys, their testes switch on, if you like, in retrospect, and it's at that point that we then start to produce larger amounts of estrogens and testosterones, both male and female. But the male has a constant flow as it once it started. It does increase over age. It reaches a peak and then comes down, and it's all very lovely and gradual. I'm not dissing the male physiology here, but the challenge that females have is that the same kind of pattern evolves over time. But because ours is a monthly cycle, or on average a 28-day, we have this extra shift. So we have an increase in levels like males do, but it wobbles as it goes along. And that's the menstrual cycle. So from the point of starting the menstrual cycle just after puberty, we are pre-programmed to have about 400 to 450 periods over 40 years, and then they stop. So there's a hormone highway from the beginning to the end. But for some reason, we're not actually given very many instructions, one about our menstruation. So we kind of muddle along. We're given some basic guidelines on the mechanics of it, essentially, but we're not really educated on menstruation. So consequently, 30 or so years later, as our ovaries decide that they're not going to be as active, and we reach this time zone referred to as perimenopause, and the word peri just means before menopause. So it's a gradual winding down to really what would technically be menopause day. Because it's when you've gone 12 consecutive months without a period. So that's the real definition of menopause. So the pause of your menses, which is what the Latin for menstrual periods was. And then the very next day, you're postmenopause. Right. So it's a whole continuum, which there isn't. It's not that the information is not there. There is oodles of research. Estrogen is one of the biggest researched hormones, and you type it into Google. It's just how it's been explained to us, and it hasn't been put into relevant and meaningful terms for what we called the modern menopause. So
Mm.
the way we lead our lives is very different. The menstrual cycle hasn't changed, but the way we lead our lives has. And there's this bit of a clash going on currently. Well, not currently, but we're noticing it a lot more because of the cohort of 30, 40, 50-year-olds that are now reaching menopause. I've had a very different kind of life to the women before us. So this is why you're generally hearing more about it, because it's having a huge impact. And then it's having a huge impact post-menopause as well. So there's quite a lot going on.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think it's not spoken about as much as it should be, Fiona? What's the reason for that, do you think? It's strange, isn't it, given it affects so many, well, 50% of the population at least.
Yeah. Given it's a fundamental biological process, you know, and you would expect it to be talked about. But when you look into the kind of evolutionary aspects of it, menstruation itself, there have always been some cultural and religious influences with it. And so there's, you know, misguided information and misinformation that has perpetuated. And then there's things, because menstruation itself, you know, the cramps that we get and the kind of vulnerabilities that we experience at different times of the month, we don't necessarily talk about it much ourselves because we don't want to look vulnerable. You know, we want to compete on a level playing field. But in actual fact, we're doing ourselves a disservice because we're not really tuning into our bodies and our, you know, understanding our health and well-being fully. And therefore, if we don't, we can't expect to share it with co-menstruators if we don't really know what's going on. So it's been one of these like really curious things for many, many years. And that's why we don't talk much about menopause, because we don't actually talk much about menstruation either. So it's just not shared very well, but it is becoming so. I mean, I've been incredibly busy the last couple of weeks, lots and lots of conversations. So it is starting to happen, but there's still a lot that needs to be done.
A long way to go. So in terms of a person that may be presenting with the menopause, let's just imagine, you know, somebody goes along to the GP with some complaints. You know, what might they be experiencing that they haven't necessarily recognized as the menopause? What sort of things may be going on for them?
Initially, it's the psychological symptoms that seem to manifest first. Not always, but if we were talking about like a typical pattern, so the tipping point of hormonal decline starts about 38, but we don't really notice it very much unless we're very tuned into ourselves. And when you do notice a change, it's kind of like the you feel a little bit brain foggy. We refer to brain fog. You also might feel curiously sad and uncharacteristically anxious, which
So not your usual way of being.
Not your usual way of being, but with the very large groundswell, and no disrespect to the mental health movement, that part of the perimenopause can get mixed up with a mental health challenge. And so we just sit on that and we think, okay, well, it's a mental health difficulty, and you might go to the doctor, and if that's a couple of the first things that you say, given that the doctor's only got 10 minutes, with all due respect, they might go, okay, well, let's start you with some, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy or some talking therapies. Let's look at a mental health wellness first aid for you, and maybe let's try some antidepressants. And the conversation doesn't go any further. So the assumption is that, okay, that's been fixed, or we'll look at how we mend that. Then maybe another couple of years later, if you've also had maybe some brain fog, sudden fatigue, crushing fatigue, like and things like that, that is uncharacteristic, things that are uncharacteristic. But the problem is, as females, we generally don't say anything when they suddenly occur. We'll sit and wait, and then they become normal. And then we still don't say anything because we'll just put up with it. We must be tired. There's a lot going on. Maybe we're just not eating enough or exercising enough. And we'll come up with lots and lots of reasons why we're just like it because we are, and not realizing that it's this gradual drop in your estrogen levels that are going to get even lower and lower and lower, because we go from very high estrogen levels to very low menopause, and then on menopause day, post-menopause, we're then living with super low levels of estrogen for the rest of our lives. Now, obviously, we don't drop down dead, and this is why it's not really a disease. It's not something that everybody goes, oh, we need to do something about. But those low levels of estrogen for extended periods of time. Bear in mind that our life expectancy is 83. We used to die around 60, and our menopause is 50. Now, that age hasn't changed very much. It maybe has gone up a little bit. But in actual fact, we didn't live long enough to have much of a post-menopause. And we also didn't live this energetic high-stress life either. So this is why we've got these two windows now kind of colliding, with our life expectancy increasing. Our menopause is maybe happening sooner, and our post-menopause is nearly a third of our lives.
Wow.
So the symptoms that evolve from the very early ones, from the anxiety, the tiredness, that's then when you start to get the classic ones that we might know of, like hot flushes, the aching joints, the irregular periods. Then you go, oh my gosh, it could be menopause. Is it menopause? I'm not too sure. And by that time, you've probably already about 5 or 6 years into hormonal decline.
Sure. And by then, you've probably been prescribed various antidepressants, and
you've probably been to the doctor a few times, and nobody's joined the dots. And
of course, Fiona, I suppose there are secondary impacts, aren't there? So if you are more fatigued, you've got brain fog, you're feeling more physically achy, you may be less productive at work, so you may be struggling, having more stress at work. So somebody may misinterpret those symptoms as, work stressful, it's because of my work. Or it may be that I suppose it could affect libido as well, I'm imagining, and maybe relationship life starts to go into some sort of decline, or the mood aspects start to create some sort of difficulties in the relationship. So there start to become these various other possible reasons for why I'm feeling that way, of negative loops that are kind of
absolutely,
So the menopause and the physiological part of it somehow gets a bit buried under everything else.
It does. We can.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's generally what then creates this bigger challenge, because you've got the secondary issues and what we call, like, you have the signs and symptoms of the actual, the biology of what's happening, but then it's this knock-on effect, and how our hormones affect, the probability of our behavior. And then like, we can accidentally be labeled as moody, and we kind of take on that persona, or you believe yourself to be tired, and then you continue to think, oh, I must be tired all the time. So there is a lot to do with mindset, but it is driven by the ovaries. We have to remember that, and the levels of estrogen, but the hormone collective, and so the stresses that we will have. So when cortisol is high, estrogen just can't do its job properly. And then when estrogen can't do its job properly, it has a knock-on effect to other things like our digestion and metabolism. And then if you, on top of that, you've got the layer of anxiety of knowing you're about to be moody, or potentially, next week you're going to be moody, because you could start to feel it. It's a bit like premenstrual tension. And you will snap at somebody, and you almost can't help it. So you get anxious at the anticipation of what may happen when you're in a situation. So the relationships, not only with other people, but the one you have with yourself as well, as you start to transition, when you don't know what's going on. When you know what's going on, you can look at it with a completely different mindset.
So I suppose in this sense, where can people get a bit more information? I know you're an affiliate member of the British Menopause Society. And I know you run something called the Menopause School. So are they good sources of information for
we have some courses on the Menopause School that we have available for groups and communities, and I've got one online soon coming up about menstrual health, so to join the dots between periods and perimenopause. And then we have our menopause doula course, but on the menopause doula site, so we also have some blogs and information. But if you reach out to us on any of our portals, and we also have a free group on Facebook which you can just come in and share how you're feeling with other people. And we focus very much on the whole person approach. So whilst I'm a member of the British Menopause Society, and I'm an advocate of HRT, and I work with menopause specialists, it's how you look at this whole situation and how you select the things for what I call your menopause toolkit. It might change. It's not set in stone, but understanding what the variables are. And the one thing about menopause that you can predict is that it will be unpredictable. So there's things, I noticed somebody said about meditation. That's amazing. Mindfulness, breathing, what I call vitamin O, so oxygen, resetting yourself. That's absolutely, a non-negotiable in my book. And you need to make time to breathe on purpose, with a purpose, which is that's the closest I get to meditation, I have to say, because I'm not very good at not thinking about things. So in the traditional sense of meditation, but you can, even when you put the kettle on, right, stand there and breathe. And don't move until the kettle's boiled.
So use these moments in the day to pause, to just breathe, to ground yourself. I mean, there's a lot of good mindfulness type techniques that people can use. But I suppose we're moving into how can people get some sort of symptom relief. Now, you mentioned HRT, hormone replacement therapy, Fiona. Do you want to say a bit about that? Is that something that everybody should consider as they are going through this process?
You are opening a can of worms there. But it is important to talk about it. So the big picture is that, yes, in all honesty, we should, everybody should have that conversation, because I think it's a bit of an eye-opener, and it can actually take you a while to understand the relevance and how HRT would fit in. So HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy. It's getting kind of reframed more so to kind of like estrogen therapy or menopause hormone therapy, because in fact diabetics are treated with hormone replacement therapy. If you think about it, an insulin dependent diabetic, insulin is the hormone in the same way that estrogen is a hormone. The same with thyroxine treatment. So anything that when you receive hormone treatment, you may already be receiving hormone treatment, but if you have a Mirena coil, so that's a version of contraception, but it's also part of your hormone replacement therapy for menopause. And the way that replacing the estrogen works is as your estrogen starts to decline, like with our menstruation, we've always got this little bit of a wobble going on. But the estrogen tends to decline in sharp spikes. It'll come down, then it might go back up, then it will come down, it go back up like this. And it's the way I described it earlier was like, if you can't afford flashing lights and you're having a disco at home, the closest thing you could do is grab the dimmer switch and switch it on and off, right? That's a bit like what's happening with your ovaries as you reach this point of hormonal decline. They don't switch off gradually. And so this is an erratic behavior and therefore erratic levels of estrogen. Now, we can use lots of things in the menopause toolkit, like breathing, good sleep hygiene, moving, is without question a really good one. Anything that helps to relax and reduce cortisol levels. We want to look at reducing inflammation. And these are all tiny little things that you can layer upon layer that will be beneficial and help relieve symptoms. It is a whole kind of like a lifestyle management process. Now, if you add estrogen back into the equation, what it does, and we can use some COVID terminology, it kind of smooths the curve. It stops the wild swings. Okay, so you kind of like buffering the fluctuations. Now, it's the fluctuations that can give you that unexpected hot flush, the unexpected fatigue, the brain fog, the aches and pains, the itchiness, the burning sensation, you know, all these, there's, you know, a hundred more symptoms in reality. Okay, you'll see various lists saying 34, 44, 54, but in reality, it's also how we describe it as well. Okay, so it's not, this is why it's so difficult to understand what's going on, because there's such a wide variation. So if you replace the estrogen, it stops the swings and it can help manage the menopause more effectively. So that's just one reason why you might want to use it. But the other reason is for the long-term health benefits.
Just for one moment, Fiona, there's Lorraine is viewing, and she's just put a comment through that she did it without medication and used meditation. I'd also say don't fight it. I know you're advocating meditation and so on. Well, would you like to say anything to that comment?
Yes. The idea that you do with or without, that's where the conversation, if you have the conversation with a lot more information, you're more able to make an informed choice. Now, I also manage my menopause without using HRT. Okay. And I also felt that that was probably the right thing to do. But when I got more information, I realized I could have made my life a lot easier. And it's not a case of either or, it's as well as. Because you can manage your menopause symptoms without medication. Absolutely. It can be done. It's not, sometimes not easy. There's about 25% of women who find those fluctuations incredibly debilitating. And when we're talking about workplaces and things like that, it can be very, very challenging. About 50% of women will notice some of the symptoms and will find them what's termed, it's a horrible word, bothersome. When you're in the middle of it, it feels a lot more than the word bothersome. And 25% of women say they don't notice them. Now, the symptom part of it, I have to really underline, that's not the important part, okay? It's this high to low, right? What you do in between is a personal choice in how you choose to manage those symptoms and how it's affecting you. But it's this post-menopause bit that we have to look at now. Now, post-menopause, when we have low levels of estrogen, we are at higher risk of developing the following. Dementia.
Significant.
Right? Dementia, type 2 diabetes, bowel cancer, heart disease,
goodness me,
and osteoporosis. Those are the big five, right? This is what's causing the global crisis, really, from a healthcare perspective, and the not understanding the bigger picture, which we have not been taught. It's nobody's fault, but nobody kind of mentioned it to us when we were starting our periods. You know, that the estrogen that fluctuates on a monthly basis provides support for our bones, our muscles, our brain, our nervous system, our immune system, our digestive system. You know, every single component of our body.
So it's not just the reproductive system.
It's not just a reproductive system.
Body.
And so do men. You have estrogen like we do, and we have testosterone like you do, and together as part of the hormone collective. And it's the added, like this lifestyle that we now lead that is like compounding the effect. So the other challenge with choosing either or is that the wear and tear that you experience during the transition, right? If your natural, let's say, menopause toolkit is not giving you enough support, you are experiencing more wear and tear. So consequently, once you get to post-menopause, you could be at higher risk of those conditions because of the wear and tear you've been through. If you provide your body with that extra support, even transitioning, you might find the wear and tear is less, and you'll actually bet you will benefit in lots of different ways. Now, I didn't. I chose not to because I thought that was the right thing. It wasn't until much later on, and only just last year, and I am 54 next week, that I went, oh, do you know what? I didn't know enough about the postmenopause and the consequences. And I just managed to get in on the window, what we call the window. There's like a good window to start taking hormone replacement therapy. And so I've now topped up my estrogen. And so I'm very lucky to have started when I did, because I will get the health protection benefits now. And not be as at high risk of osteoporosis and those conditions that I mentioned. So
And how
this
did
is
you do
a
that,
risk
Fiona?
benefit ratio that you need to discuss and have that information.
Did you do that with your GP then primarily?
I happen to be working with some of the top people in the country, so I managed to have a chat with them.
Okay.
So originally I had a private prescription, and then I went to speak to my GP. So I did it that way around.
You were ahead of the game, and
Yeah.
and really through the conversation you're having here, Fiona, you're helping other people to get ahead of that game as well. So it's invaluable, really.
Yeah, and I
You know,
can't do
you-
one without the other. It's a
Yeah.
kind of conception. You know,
Yeah.
if I go off now and have a baguette, you see, I found certain food types disagree as you go through transition. And that's to do with the relationship that estrogen has with insulin, apart from anything else in your gut biome and everything. And for me, I still stick to a very strict food choice, lifestyle choices and everything. Because the HRT can only do so much.
Yes.
You know, it's not a miracle cure.
You've still got to have the lifestyle.
You've still got to
component.
do all the other things as well.
So good exercise, good diet, good sleep, work-life balance. All of this is important, and I suppose there's, people can do some self-help around that or read around it. I mean, there are coaches as well that can help with these things, but take it seriously, I suppose, because that list of 5 conditions, and I remember you saying and writing, because you've written about this and we've got it on our...
That's it. I knew I'd written something.
Yeah.
When you asked me where's the information, I was like, where did I put it? Of course it's on your website.
So on www.solihullwellbeingclinic.com, there is an article, Fiona, you've written, and it goes into some detail about these things. But those 5 conditions, and there was something you said as well about, I don't want to scare people, but something about life expectancy, and you haven't mentioned that today.
No, it is. It's like I'm such a science geek about it all, though. I found the whole subject fascinating, but I kind of had to dive deep into it to unravel it so that we could kind of simplify it. But it's this bigger picture that we need to be looking at. So dementia is the thing that the biggest killer of women at the moment, from the latest Office of National Statistics. And our life expectancy is now 83 as females in the UK. But our disability-free life expectancy has dropped now. And it was a significant amount. I think it dropped about 3 or 4 months in just 2 years. And there are healthy, the way they phrase it, it's healthy disability-free life expectancy is now 61.3 years for females living in the UK.
Which is not very much, is it, really?
No.
I mean, that's the sort of time, if you're working, you're looking to sort of stop and start to enjoy life. So
your healthy aging is for females is directly related to healthy menopausing. So it's understanding your physiology, what's going on from at least 40. I say you really got to get to grips with it. It's happening with or without you.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. So you might not get any symptoms, but that doesn't mean that you're not without your estrogen. So it's the post-menopause that you still need to be aware of.
So important, Fiona, isn't it? Because you may be in that 50% that you mentioned that go through it with little or no sort of disturbance, if you like, or bothersome symptoms. But you're still without estrogen, so you've got to look after your health thereafter.
You have to, if you're going to decide that the medication route, obviously it is a prescribed treatment, but the estrogen that they use these days is the same as our own. It's actually made from yams and soya. Obviously, it goes through massive chemical processing, so therefore it's it's not like exactly it is exactly the same, but it's not made from us. But if you choose that that's not the way to go for you, you have to think about what are you putting in your toolkit to make sure you're preserving the estrogen that you do have, and what the estrogen you do have, you allow it to work as effectively as possible. One of those key things is to get your cortisol down, which is all of the complementary therapies that you've mentioned and the talking therapies and the mindset to help reduce that cortisol. Because one of the reason, which I'll probably finish with here, I know, because we're going to go over time again. The issues to do with dementia and the connection with estrogen. Okay, so estrogen is a hormone and it's all right, but in the brain, it acts as a neuroprotectant and a neurotransmitter. Okay. And the brain actually has its emergency supply of estrogen. It's happy to share the estrogen circulating around the body throughout our whole lives, but it actually makes a little bit of its own that it will not share with the rest of the body. But in times of low estrogen, and this is where we are at higher risk of dementia, we just don't have enough circulating estrogen in the brain, and we don't have the neuroprotective qualities. Now, we might have plenty of estrogen, but if our cortisol is high and we're not dialing it down often enough, then cortisol impairs the effectiveness of estrogen, particularly in the brain. So this is, this is the whole kind of
there's a lot to think about.
There's a lot to think about, but it's actually really simple. That just makes it sound complicated. It's not really.
That's okay. So no problem. I mean, we are running out of time. So Fiona's the Menopause School website is on screen there. You're very welcome to visit and have a look at that. And Fiona, I'll come back to you in just a moment. But in terms of our wellbeing sessions, we will be having another wellbeing session. We try to do these every Thursday evening at 6 p.m. And next week, we're going to be joined by Cal Neild. Cal Neild is a colleague of mine. She's a cognitive analytical psychotherapist, what we call CAT for short, CAT psychotherapy. And Cal is going to be talking to us about how we might step out of unhelpful patterns, emotional patterns, relationship patterns, behavioral patterns. How can we escape those repeating cycles? And cognitive analytical psychotherapy is a very good modality by which you can do that, a very practical strategy. So if you're interested in that, you want to know a little bit more about different modes of psychotherapy, next Thursday, the 7th of October at 6 p.m. Do join us there. And Fiona, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on tonight and sharing your knowledge. I know you can't say everything in half an hour.
No.
I think you've done a very good job. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
It's been very wonderful, as always. Thank you very much. So see you all again next week. Bye-bye now.